In this episode of the Leadership Hustle, we're going to discuss the importance of a culture audit. Hello, and welcome to the Leadership Hustle for executives whose companies are growing fast and need leaders who are ready. Hi there, and welcome back to this episode of the Leadership Hustle. I'm Andrea Fredrickson, and I'm joined with my co-host, Michelle Hill.
Hello.
And we've got a new look.
Yes.
we've been toying around with an idea of just getting rid of the logo and the screen and just changing things up a little bit. So a little bit of a new set, same set, but just a little bit of an adjustment.
A little different.
Yeah. So as we get ready to talk about our topic today, we've been working pretty heavily in the area of culture. I mean, everything that leaders do affects the culture. Right? So
yes.
Like what they don't do, what they do, the impact, all that
Correct.
stuff. So as we talk about culture, I want everybody to remember that this is coming from a belief that culture is a byproduct of what leaders do, period. And so as we discuss today, we're going to bring out the idea of a culture audit. So, Michelle, in your words, what does culture audit mean to you? What is it? Like, what does it mean? Why is it important? Let's just kind of go down that path, get everybody on the same page.
Okay, I'll start a little bit and I'll throw some questions back at you.
Okay.
So initially, if you think about a culture audit, it's really evaluating how are we behaving? What's the impact that it's having on people? Mm-hmm. I believe that when we are in an organization, and when I'm referring to we are in an organization, I'm not referring to us. I'm referring to the people who work, live, breathe, eat in that organization. It's harder to do a culture audit. We have a lot of biases and we have a lot of blind spots. So, and we're looking through things with good intentions or bad intentions and so forth. And I think it's harder to do that audit. So an audit it truly is. It's like, what are people experiencing? How are they interpreting those, the behaviors, the messages, the unsaid messages that which is through their behaviors. And those behaviors are really focused on that leader's beliefs. Yeah. So to do that, there's a little bit of work there. And
it's hard. It's difficult.
It is. And, I always recommend to people, it's like when you get new people in, ask them, what does it feel like? But you also have to recognize there's a fear there of if I tell you it feels horrible or whatever,
right.
They may not share it because they don't necessarily want to be viewed, in a negative light either. So that makes it another layer. It's hard to get it. So
Agreed.
Spin it on your perspective, though.
So a lot of companies as we work with them initially, we talk about culture, they immediately go to their values.
Oh, yes.
And that is not what we're talking about. There may be values that are written in a way where there's behavioral expectations, but
how they want them to be.
They want them to be.
They want them to behave.
And many are aspirational as opposed to core.
What it really is.
What it really is. But as we talk about this culture audit, I agree. What we're looking for is what are the behaviors that we expect, and what are we seeing? What is actually happening? And oftentimes there is a disconnect. So we talk about big C culture, which is we have our mission, our values, and this is how we want people to behave. And then we go to the teams, and we go to the divisions, and we go to the smaller increments of your business, and it's not connected.
No,
it's
there's
not
a lot of especially the further removed they are. But even in the same building, just different floors. I mean, different departments that are just down the hall from each other.
Different leader.
Exactly. That's exactly where it points back to. What do they prioritize and what do they believe in? So how do they behave?
Yeah. And the goal is to get those two closer to being the same. Big C culture and all of the little C cultures to be closer to alignment and the same, as opposed to, I know we have our mission and values, This is how we interpret them. This is how we do the things. This is how we do the things. So the concept of we want there to be a culture audit. We believe in a culture audit, and the reason that we believe in a culture audit is because if your folks are recruiting into your business and they're talking about, well, this is what our culture is, and then that's not what you got when you got in there.
Yeah, that's not what they were sold.
That's not what they were told. That's a lie. That's literally a lie, right? And that's not what you're intending to. You expect this to be, but you don't have that.
Yes.
So what we want to do is align what you're saying and how is it aligned with the actual. So doing an audit is the first step of generating or creating the audit that you really truly want there to be. You got to do the audit part.
Yes.
Yeah. So what are some of the methods?
For doing an audit?
For doing audit. There's many ways to do it. Let's just talk about a variety of different ways that we can, what are the steps? How do you go about doing it? The first thing that I'm always looking for is, what do I think what is it that I want? Right? If I'm a leader, if I'm the senior leader, and this is really for the senior leadership team. This is not necessarily for every manager, but if we want a culture audit, we're looking for top to bottom. What does the senior group, senior executives, expect the culture to be? So if you expect a culture to be one that you're showing respect, let's break that down and say, I expect people to respect their time and the time of their coworkers. That's a behavior that I'm looking for. If I expect respect, I might be, we don't yell in our building. Like, we can disagree, we can debate, we can do it in a healthy way, but we're not raising our voice. That's a respect thing. So what are the things that you expect is typically the first place that people look, what they're looking for. But that's not always the case.
No, I think sometimes if we create too much clarity of what we want, it creates more biases where we can go look for it and find it, and now we're happy. So now we're like, oh, we must be doing the things that we want.
Right.
I think there's value in not really knowing defining exactly what it is we want, and go out and look for what are we observing, what are we noticing,
right.
And then interviewing people where they can describe what does it feel like to work there. What do you believe the expectations? What do you believe the unwritten rules are?
Okay, so you had like 3 questions there. 2 of them you didn't finish.
What do you believe the unwritten rules are? But
okay. That's a good question. What are the unwritten rules?
Because it's not in the policy handbook. It's not our values necessarily. What are the things that, are those things that we pick up on, or we notice? An unwritten rule, I was just having this conversation this morning, could be how we promote people. You've got to be a aggressive go-doer, get out there, get it done, and you're going to get promoted, regardless if you how you treat your peers. That can be it can be like, well, I can treat my peers like pretty much shit as long as I close sales, I get this done.
Right.
I'm sure they're not going to put that in their values anywhere, right?
No.
But it stands out. So that's kind of like those unwritten rules.
Right. So what are the things that are the unwritten rules? What are the things that, like, how do people treat each other around here?
Correct.
And, so you could ask, that's another interview question. It's like, so how do you treat each other within your team? How does your team treat the other team? How does the other team treat you?
Correct.
Right? Those are the things that we're asking questions about. We don't need to interrogate people, but we need to start asking those questions and make sure that our facial expression isn't, one of those like, oh, this really sucks, right? But we're looking for those things.
You can do that. But think about a lot of organizations will do surveys. And they'll do anonymous surveys, whether they do it or they outsource that survey.
Right.
It's important that if you are going to do a survey of some sort, especially outsourced but confidential, that we have questions that have them use words, describe
right.
what What does it feel like to work here? How would you just, if someone asked you what it's like to work here, what words would you share with them? How would you explain that?
Yeah. I also believe that it is imperative for leaders to go observe. So, for example, in any meeting that you're attending, if it's one of your regular meetings, if it's one of the where you do a skip meeting, a skip level meeting, if you have town hall meetings, even some one-on-one conversations become, let's have a more collaborative event. What are people saying? But just as important, what's the body language that's going along with it? So, did somebody make a comment and people started rolling their eyes? Was there an off-colored comment and no one said anything? And that's not what you want your culture to be. Is it okay for people to be late to meetings? Is it okay for people to interrupt or talk over? Go look and find out what are the behaviors that feel like, if that happened to me, that's not okay. What are we letting? What are we allowing? And rather than address it at that moment, start taking an inventory of what you're starting to see. There may be things that are isolated. There may be things that are not isolated, but they're pervasive. And so gathering that intelligence and saying, what am I seeing?
What are we noticing?
What am I noticing? And also taking inventory of when people are saying, it's not the way it used to be. And rather than going, oh, I know, you're just one of those people who don't like change. Like, tell me more. Tell me what's different than the way it used to be.
Yeah, so responding with curiosity when people say things that cause them to feel, that is indicating that things aren't the same. Things are different in that scenario, definitely. Because that's an easy one to identify them as someone who, they just struggle with change.
We rationalize, we justify.
And there's, they just can't adapt. They're having a hard time keeping up. And in all reality, there may be some things that how they're interpreting it, how they're experiencing it has changed, and it doesn't feel the same.
Right. So we've identified the fact that we just want to test, is what we're promoting and what we're expressing as our culture actually what we're seeing. And remember, we're not necessarily talking about values. In some cases, values do describe those things. But in many cases, they're not specific enough. They're very general. In some cases, they're very esoteric. However you look at your culture, it's really about the behaviors that are rewarded and tolerated and expected. So now that we've gathered all this information, we've got, here's some things that are going really, really well. We notice people show up on time. We notice people take turns. We notice that people can debate, but they do it in a healthy way. We notice a lot of eye rollings when it comes to this. We notice that, so we've taken this inventory. Now what do you do with it?
You got to figure out what you want to do with it.
Right?
And the first thing is go in with a lens and a mindset of curiosity of what, it's like not giving excuses, not justifying, not rationally. Yeah, none of that. It's got to be, okay, was that kind of a one-off? Do we need to go look further on some things? That could be, maybe you saw a consistent theme because you spent quite a bit of time. But it's addressing, is this what we want or not? Because if we continue to reward whatever that is, it's going to continue to happen.
Right.
And then we're not going to create the environment that we're hoping for.
Right. The other is, if you have expectations of what your culture is, does what you found align with that? And to some degree, I think it's really important that you tell people, we've been auditing people's behavior and how we're demonstrating these values or the culture that we're expressing in our interviews and that we're promoting during reviews and as we talk and as we learn, we're doing these things. And here are some of the things that we've noticed and express that. Where we're struggling is here, and we need to give some special attention to these.
Yes.
And just give people an understanding of we're doing this. The second part of this is not just saying, here's what we expect and here's where we're doing well, here's where we need some work, but maybe things have adjusted. Maybe we've we haven't included that. We need to expand because the world is changing, because our employees have evolved, because we're noticing this is not necessarily being included in respect, but we need to adjust the expectation of our culture. So I remember years and years ago, I come from old school where you were ready to go at the time your start time was. So office time was 8 o'clock. You were sitting in a meeting at 8 o'clock because you were ready to go at the 8 o'clock meeting. And people stayed until 5 o'clock, and people took their 1 hour lunch breaks. And this is what the tradition was, and this is how we worked. Well, over the course of decades, I have to say, it truly has evolved in our business, and for many good reasons. But it was one of those things like, is this what we want? Is this not what we want? Is this what we're going to? Are we tolerating this? Is this an Andrea thing? Is this an us thing? We were looking at that from our perspective, but I think that every company has to say, this is intentional versus accidental.
Well, and sometimes accidental can be accidental. Is it what we want?
It's true. Absolutely true.
I mean, accidental doesn't mean bad. It just simply means it's different. We've
we've
adjusted,
but we have to endorse it.
Yeah, is that what we want to continue now that we're recognizing we've shifted, right?
Yeah.
Versus we haven't shifted and we need to shift because that's also a situation.
Yeah.
As you're uncovering those things.
So as we look at this, people are like, I don't have time to do a culture audit. For God's sakes, Andrea, I got too much other stuff to do. And yet, in reality, knowing what your culture is, why would you even put mission and values and culture together unless it wasn't important? So if it is important, then we've got to make sure that what we're promising, the experiences and the promises that our employee brand is out there and our customer brand that's out there, is it aligned with our behaviors? So let's audit it. And then if there are things that need to be changed, let's adjust them because they need to be changed back to the way they need to be. Or we endorse things as they're moving forward. There's two parts to that. You can't just say, nice to know.
Correct.
Right?
And I think it's extremely important that people understand the beliefs that we need to have to align with those behaviors. Because if they don't understand the belief, if they don't believe in it, or if they don't have the same belief or understand what the belief is, then we're going to get resistance or pushback, or the buy-in will be a lot harder. So
and one of our upcoming episodes is on why. And so it's not just the why, it's the context of why is important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in an upcoming episode. So again, as we're talking about culture, having an intentional culture is so important. Understanding that culture is the byproduct of what leaders allow, tolerate, reward, promote, expect, it's all of those things. And so we probably have to do just a quick little audit. It's like, are we seeing those things? And not just, are we noticing that people are respectful? It's like, no, are they being respectful in emails? Are they being respectful when the boss isn't watching? Are they being respectful? If that's I'm just using that as an example, but it can show up in so many different ways. We've got to make sure that we're aligning behaviors and expectations and not excusing those away.
yes.
So if this episode was valuable to you, or you have questions or need some help, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to have a conversation. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss another episode.